I feel a demonstration coming on here. Hold on a second, folks. Let me set up for this. And believe me, what other show is going to attempt to do what I'm about to do in real time? This is going live, folks. Here comes the demo. All right, lay it on me. Bring it in here. All right, here is the discussion nobody really wants to have, but we all need to have. This is 100 Army men. This represents society, okay? This is what I want to talk about because nobody seems to understand the concept of herd immunity. So I'm going to get down to basics here. We were told that the COVID-19 virus was a novel virus. I believe that that right there, the WHO, Bill Gates, Tony Fauci, calling this a novel virus was the incorrect hypothesis right out of the gate. There's been some great articles I've been sharing on Twitter, @DelBatry, if you want to read those, talking about this exact point. But what does a novel coronavirus mean? It means it's the first time we've ever seen anything like it, which means everybody, 100% of people represented by these 100 Army men, everybody was susceptible because nobody had any immunity. Unlike flu, some of you had flu last year, so you're going to be immune this year. You know, we had herd immunity. Well, what they're saying is nobody has herd immunity to COVID-19. All right, fine. That means how do you get to herd immunity? Essentially, this is COVID. I'm looking at the wrong camera. Here we go. This is COVID, right? This is what is, started to spread in Wuhan. Well, eventually comes to America. Imagine this is America. Now, here's the concept of herd immunity. Herd immunity says that somewhere between 65 to 85% of people, if you're using vaccines, sometimes it takes more, like MMR vaccine, it takes 95% of people to get the vaccine. But I want to talk about natural herd immunity right now. Here's what happens. The virus has to be caught by, and you got to get over it, and then you have lifelong immunity, or at least very long immunity, which establishes this bond. See, here's what has to happen. It starts coming in, right? Here comes the virus. It's hitting some people, not others. It's spreading around. Some people, they just happen to be at the wrong party, they didn't get it. But it goes around, and it keeps going, and it's hitting everybody. We're sharing it. I went to a bar, you went to a party, somebody went to a Black Lives Matter protest, and they ended up getting it. And at a certain point, you get like this. There's only a few people left, roughly about, 15% of people, maybe 10%, that don't have it, but they can't get it because they're protected by all the other people that have come in contact with the COVID-19 virus. And so the question is, how long does it take to get to this, and what's actually going on? Here is what's going on with this. This is what has to happen. And this is what I've been telling you. We need to get to herd immunity. Remember, you're going to get this one of two ways. Either you're going to come in contact with this virus that has a 0.26% death rate or a 99.74% success rate when it comes to your immune system. Either we're going to get to herd immunity by catching this cold, or they're going to inject you with it to try and stop it. But I know there's some of you out there that are saying, well, hold on a second, Del. Didn't you see the headlines? Didn't you know that the antibodies don't actually last? This is what they have been trying to tell us in the news recently. COVID-19 antibodies don't last very long, raising risk of lost immunity. COVID antibodies fade rapidly, raising risk of lost immunity. New England Journal of Medicine, rapid decay of anti-SARS-CoV-2 antibodies in persons with mild COVID-19. Still, the results call for caution regarding antibody-based immunity passports, herd immunity, perhaps vaccine durability, especially in light of short-lived immunity against common human coronaviruses. We warned you this was happening. We told you there's going to be an attack on herd immunity. Apparently, this disease is like no other disease that ever was. This is more like a Marvel comic design disease. This thing, you don't actually get immunity when you get it. Well, it's totally bull, and they know it. And actually, 2 months ago, we reported on why this was baloney. We warned you they were going to try and attack herd immunity based on natural immunity and say it's waning. And this is what we had to say because the immunity is really coming from T cells. Check out what we reported 2 months ago. I'm going to prove this to you. I guarantee you over the next couple of weeks, there's going to be a growing discussion about T cells because there's a lot of studies now showing that antibody production may not be the most effective part of your immunity to COVID-19.
The trouble with antibodies is antibodies will work outside of the cell. So if you're dealing with a bacteria then that's great. Bacteria are outside of cells. But these viruses are inside of cells. So when a virus enters a cell, that viral particle is going to be picked up usually by macrophages. These are another type of white blood cell. The macrophage will process that, put it on the surface, and I think that's what your video is showing here. It'll put it on the surface with a marker that says, hey, T cell, come on over here. And it'll bring in either a T helper cell or a cytotoxic T cell or even something called a killer cell. And it will bind with that receptor and it'll say, hey, T cell, killer cell, this is your target, go get them, tiger.
We're like in this old school world where we're discussing everything based on antibodies, but the real truth is that T cells are proven to be the more important discussion. We told you it was all going to be about T cells. We said that antibodies had very little to do with it. They tried to attack your brain. They tried to suck the brain cells right out of your head. They tried to deny you oxygen and say, well, you're not going to have herd immunity because the antibodies are waning. But they had a problem, didn't they? That argument backfired on them because their brains are working like children, like third graders. Here's the headline that actually really got in their way. Studies show coronavirus antibodies may fade fast, raising questions about what? Oh no, vaccines. You see, this was the problem. They realized if we lie to everybody and say it was all about antibodies, all of the trials going on for the last several months, the warp speed of our coronavirus vaccine, whether it's Moderna's here in America or the vaccine unicorn they're trying to find at Oxford right now, either way, they are only going to be testing for antibodies. In fact, that's the way we know that vaccines work, is that the antibodies were present right after the trial. But if the antibodies wear off in nature, guess what? They wear off from the vaccine too. So does the vaccine not work? And suddenly you watch this story get buried. Because the real truth is it's T cells. Here's the headlines we're seeing now. July 20th, studies suggest T cells important in fighting coronavirus. You'd think these studies just said this just now. The people with hidden immunity against COVID-19. But while the world has been preoccupied with antibodies, not the high wire, but the rest of the world watching CNN and MSNBC, researchers have started to realize that there might be another form of immunity, one which in some cases has been lurking undetected in the body for years. An enigmatic type of white blood cell is gaining prominence. And though it hasn't previously featured heavily in the public consciousness because we've been avoiding it and lying to you about it, it may well prove to be crucial in our fight against COVID-19. This could be the T cells' big moment. Now, just a couple of months ago, actually just over a month ago, there was a brilliant scientist, not featured on CNN or MSNBC, but featured here and featured in a lot of magazines. In fact, he's considered to be the most important neuroscientist in the world, Professor Carl Friston. Now, he said something that directly correlates to T cells, talking about the immunity and the susceptibility that he was finding in his work studying COVID-19 with the most important computer models that have ever touched the brain. Here's what he had to say.
Under the hypothesis that there exists certain kinds of non-susceptibility, and you ask what are the levels of non-susceptibility, i.e. dark matter, that best explain the data, then the answers at the moment are roughly, well, let me focus on America. It looks as if about half of the people in America have yet to play the game. So they may be out of the game because they're self-isolating and shielding at home, and they will remain so on their farms or in their apartments until it's safe to come outside again. Some people may be just on islands or sequestered in remote areas. So about half the people are just not actually started to play yet. Of the remaining half, it looks as though about a half simply cannot catch the virus. And if they do, then they have a 50% probability of just developing a mild illness. So, for example, they could have what's called a mucosal immunity, that they fight off the virus at the mucosal level, or they could develop a T cell immunity that would not necessarily appear in antibody testing. So that leaves just a core subset of a subset of about 20%.
Is it safe to say that roughly 80% of the American population is either just not in the game at all or not susceptible so that we really are, we should be focusing in your mind on this 20% that can be contagious, can spread the illness?
Yes, 80% would be possibly optimistic side, but certainly around that level, yes.
Well, here it comes again. Yes, that was back on June 18th. When is it now? It's over a month, almost a month and a half later. We beat them to it, but here come the headlines. This is what that article went on to say that we were just looking at. Most bizarrely of all, when researchers tested blood samples taken years before the pandemic started, they found T cells which were specifically tailored to detect proteins on the surface of COVID-19. This suggests that some people already had a pre-existing degree of resistance against the virus before it ever infected a human. And it appears to be surprisingly prevalent. 40 to 60% of unexposed individuals had these cells, meaning 40 to 60% of people, as Carl Friston pointed out. Now remember, he is just mapping all the information from around the world through a supercomputer that usually maps the brain, and what he described it as, there appears to be a dark matter. The way we would see it in the brain is dark matter, the way we would see it in space is dark matter, but in this case, that dark matter appears to be people who cannot catch COVID-19. He suggested several reasons why that might be, but he said it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 80%. That might be a little optimistic. Well, he's not alone. He only led that charge. The Highwire led that charge. Now, multiple studies around the world are coming to the exact same conclusion. Coronavirus levels of herd immunity in UK may already be high enough to prevent second wave, studies suggest. The researchers posit that some of the population may already have a high level of immunity to COVID-19 without ever having caught it. Modeling how differing levels of pre-existing immunity between individuals could affect the overall threshold needed to prevent the resurgence of the virus, they found that this could be as low as 20%. Calculations along a similar line by Gabriella Gomes, a professor of mathematics and statistics at Strathclyde University, have also placed the threshold needed for herd immunity at below 20%. This is a study by Dr. Gupta in the UK, the original study. Here's another study. They keep coming. They're all saying the same thing. Surprisingly, you have T-cell immunity. How? From the cold you got last year, or maybe even 5 years ago. See, antibodies had nothing to do with it. You've been carrying these T cells, and that means we have immunity running rampant through this country before COVID-19 ever came. So that means that this whole experiment really was irrelevant. Let me look at a different way to look at this. You see, this is what these studies are showing us right here, that essentially all these in white are people that were never going to be able to catch COVID-19. In one article, it looks to be about 60%. In Gupta and multiple studies, they're saying about 80% of us are not susceptible to COVID-19 because we already have T cells. Cross-reactive SARS-CoV T cells epitopes revealed pre-existing T cell responses in 81% of unexposed individuals. And validation of similarity to common cold human coronaviruses provided a functional basis for postulated heterologous immunity in SARS-CoV-2 infections. Oh my God, Tony, you're in trouble. You are in real trouble because you blew it here. Deborah Birx, WHO, Bill Gates. Oh, I thought this was the virus of the century. And as it turns out, it's just another cold. See, here's the point that I made at the beginning with all the green figures. When they said it was a novel coronavirus, we now know they were dead wrong. That meant it was nothing like any other cold we had, when now it is proving it is so much like every other cold we've had that this many people, somewhere between 60 and 80%, already have immunity because it's in the exact same family as the cold they had last year or 2 to 5 years ago. That means, folks, the bar for herd immunity is so low. We only need 20% to get involved with this cold, this infection, in order to reach herd immunity. So when we think about the devastation, when we think about all the jobs being lost, your job is disappearing. Forget about that check you're smoking on. You're not going to be high for long. Eventually you come crashing down to the reality that you cannot feed your family, and that China is taking over the world and manufacturing everything because all of our manufacturing's down. We can save ourselves. All we need is for a few of these individuals among us to catch this illness. Now, you may be saying to yourself, but it's deadly, Del. And people say everybody that dies counts. It's true. It's true. People that die, it's unfortunate we die, and many of us have not accepted the fact that a part of life actually is death. But for those of you that are terrified about death, and remember, if you think I'm, I got it, Del, I get it, then go ahead and share this video with that friend you can't seem to get it through to. I want to talk about the actual death rate, because I've heard polls where people are saying 80% of people are going to get it and 20% of us are going to die. I'm like, 20% of you are going to die. How'd you ever think that? I see people like terrified, 25 years old, wearing the mask, like, oh my God, you're going to get me killed if you're not wearing a mask. So how about we get to the math? Let me make this as simple as possible. Let's do some math, shall we? All right. All right, give me the board. Here we go. All righty. Let me try and make this as clean as possible. When you look at the CDC website, they have clearly said that the death rate amongst symptomatic people is 0.4%. If we add in the asymptomatic, which is the big story of our time, the asymptomatic, they took a conservative look at about 35% are asymptomatic. I think based on what we're seeing in the knowledge, so many more are going to be testing positive. They weren't asymptomatic. They had the cold last year. It could be as high as 80%. But the conservative number leaves us at 0.26%. So let's remember this. The CDC actual death rate is 0.26%. Now, I recognize some people get confused by the way this is written. We get our decimals and our percentages confused, and some people are saying, well, 20% of people are going to die. No, it's 0.25% of people are going to die across this country based on the numbers and what we now know as we collect numbers and model into it. But let me break this down for you because it gets very, very interesting, and we can look at this another way. So currently, right now, the death toll in America, is 130,250 people. It's a large number, granted, but 130,250 people have currently died in the United States of America. I'm not going to take issue with all the bloated numbers we've told you about and what's going on there. I am assuming that we are seeing waves. I think that locking down had some effect, and so we are seeing another boost in cases. Deaths are going down, definitely, but here's what we're talking about. These deaths, because the numbers really, it matters on the death, okay? Now, remember, 130,000 is really 0.26% of those infected. So let's figure out how many people have actually been infected. The way we do that is we take 0.0026. Now remember, you got to add back those pesky little zeros if you're leaving a percentage and going into a decimal, all right? And now we do this. We put in the 130,250, and what we come out with is the number, is that 56,000? 50,96,153. This right here is the current infection rate that we think is happening in America, and we see lots of things, and this is just based on the testing. It could be higher than that. We're getting more reports that there may be even more infected, but let's go with that number. 50 million people now in America have been infected if this 0.26% number is right. Now, here's the next point I want to make. Now, if we look at, I want to bring up the graph. We're bringing you CDC numbers. They give you age groups like every 10 years. I'm going to collect some of those age groups together just so that we're not here for the next year and a half. Believe me, we're going to try and move through this. So if you're over the age of 65, what we now know is that death rate is 104,232. This is how many people over the age of 65 have passed away. That's a really scary number, and this is really who we're trying to protect, right? They make up a huge part of this. How big a part of the entire number? Well, the way we figure that out is we divide this by the total amount of actual deaths, which is 130,250, And what we find out is basically that it comes out at 0.800, meaning 80% of the deaths in America are happening to those over the age of 65. That is the bulk. We know this coming out of New York. Everybody said this. But again, I'm going to try and make this make sense for us. That means that this group right here, they're in danger. And we're being told we have to wear masks to protect them, and that's the only way. And they're selling us on this whole idea. But I want to sell you on a different idea. I want to give you a real exit strategy forward, because all we're doing is making the virus linger longer so that more of these people can get sick. What is your actual risk with COVID-19? And that's what I want to talk about. Because if you're walking around and you're not in that age group and you're afraid of dying, then I need to get some sense put into your head. So let's look at the numbers, shall we? Now let's go to 45, age 45 to 64. That number is 22,000 people, 446 have died in this age group, 45 to 64, a much lower number. What percentage is that? We heard 0.26% is the death rate, but what is your death rate? Well, the way we figure that out is we go ahead and take the larger number, the 50 million, because we want to know your direct relation to the amount of people that have been infected. So those infected in this age group, we go 50,096,153. You get the idea if you can't read that. And the number that we get from that is 0.0004. 0.0004. That's tiny. That's 0.04%, not 0.4%. We're now in the hundreds, 0.04%, otherwise 0.0004. But what does that mean for me? I mean, this is where I think we're getting confused. What does that number actually mean? Well, let's figure out how many people have got to be infected for you to die, all right? If you think you're that one. Well, here's how we figure that out. We take a 1, hold on, so I get darker. We take a 1 and we divide it by 0.004. You never knew we were going to give you a math class here in the Highwire, did you? All right, and when we do that, what we come out with is this number, 2,500. This means that 1 in 2,500 people, if you are 45 to 64, 2,500 people have to be infected for one to die. Now, what I also want you to think about is, are you going to be that one person? Because if you have autoimmune disease and you feel like you really are sicker than your average 2,500 people in your age demographic, then maybe you want to stay locked home. But if you are out there jogging or you're a healthy person, relatively healthy, your odds are really low, 1 in 2,500. But it gets better. Now imagine if you're between the age of 25 to 44, okay? In that group, we've only had 3,346 deaths. If I do all the same math, I'm going to rush through this now. That means your risk is 0.0000, 4 zeros, and then a 6. This is tiny. We're in zero world here. What does that mean if I want to figure out your actual risk? That's 1 in 16,666. 16,000 people have got to get sick for one person in this age category. If you're between the age of 25 to 44 and you've been afraid for your life, will you please let this sink into whatever remaining brain cells you have? It's really critical. And lastly, if you're between the age of 0 and 24, you know, those impressionable kids that really feel like they're doing the right thing, but they're terrified. I've seen them. They're scared. I don't want to die. Only 226 of you have passed away in the United States of America. That means your risk is 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros before you get to a 4. I'm not making this up, folks. This is the reality. What does that translate to? 1 in 250,000. And this is who we're afraid to send to school. This is who we want to mask because, oh my God, my kid could get sick. We've got to protect the kids. Come on, people. Have we lost our minds? 1 in 16,666. 1 in 2,500. 1 in 250,000. All right. I may not be getting through to all of you. So I'm gonna, my wife sometimes says, Del, you got to know when you've won your argument. Well, by God, I'm not sure I've won it. So let's do this. What does 1 in 2,500 actually look like? Let's do this in your monitor right now. There's the 1. If you pull back from that 1 to 2,500, that is your risk right there. That is the one little person out of that entire group that has a risk, right? Well, now what if it's the next group? What if it's the 25 to 44? That's 3,346. Here's what happens. That's 16,666. You can't even see your dot anymore. It's so infinitesimal. And if you're in that age category of 0 to 24, this is a lot of fun. Let's go from 16,000 to 250,000. That looks like, I mean, I'm sure on your monitor right now you can't even tell what you're looking at. 250,000 dots for one person to be at risk of dying. Okay. I'm going to beat it home. Go ahead and get the screen capture. Here we go. The COVID mortality risk by age. If you're over the age of 65, that 80% totals out at 1 in 500 is your actual risk. If you're 45 to 65, it's 1 in 2,500. If it's 25 to 44, that's 1 in 16,666. If you're 0 to 24, you have a 1 in 250,000 chance of dying. To put this all into some perspective, your risk of dying walking down the street in your lifetime is 1 in 541. You walk down the street every day of your life, and you're not terrified to do it. So, when we talk about herd immunity, we're talking about protecting this group. And let me be clear. I get a lot of emails from you that are over the age of 65. You say, Del, why do you keep saying you want to lock us down and not everybody else? I mean, it's not fair. You're really, holding out the 65. I feel healthy. I don't want to be mandated to lock down. Well, here's my point. We're all mandated to lock down. We're all being locked down. And frankly, I'll never say to mandate you. You may say 1 in 500. I'm willing to take on that risk at my age of 80 or 70 or 65. That's not a big risk in my mind, especially since it's so close to the risk of walking down the street. But this is the biggest risk group we have, and I don't want to seem heartless in saying I want to protect you. So why don't we have you lock yourself down in your house, in your homes, if you want to, for the next several years. That means the rest of these people are going to have to do their job, right? They're going to have to take the risk, which is less than walking down the street. And think about how close we are. We are so close. This is where we are starting right now, right? All we have to do, that one, 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 that one. Remember, as safe as walking down the street, folks. And there you have it. Mission accomplished. Job is done. We have done it. The exit strategy is upon us. That's what I wanted to say. It takes so few people now to reach herd immunity with everything that we know. We're right there. The only thing they're trying to do is keep us from establishing herd immunity. Why? Because Tony Fauci and everybody else, as Toby Rogers said, want to sell you a vaccine that will never, ever be here in time. We are going to have no United States of America as we know it. China, for the next 6 months, while we stay locked down waiting for a vaccine that will be totally dangerous, or at least never have been proven to be safe if it even comes along, China's producing everything we eat, everything we wear, everything we use, every computer we may or may not be able to afford, which means China just took over the world because you thought it was a better idea to wear your mask and hide from the virus when all we needed was people to take a risk less than walking down the street to get us to herd immunity the way we have every single year that the humanity has been walking on the planet Earth. If you like that clip, then be sure to check out our live broadcast of The High Wire every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. You can watch it on Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, and Twitter. We'll see you there.